Well, welcome back everyone to Pause It For Me with your host Andrew, and here from Team Dean, it's Hannah.
Team Dean?
Right?
No.
Dean, he's the blonde one, right?
No.
Okay, you're gonna have to explain it to me.
Okay. Team Jess, all the way.
But Dean.
He's okay.
Okay. Anyway, so we just finished watching the 1975 film version of Tommy by The Who. Unlike previous episodes, we didn't keep our feelings completely hidden from the other while watching the movie. We kind of said some things here and there, but it was such a bonkers movie, I couldn't help myself but to speak my mind while it was going on.
It was hard to know how to react to things because it was just so wild at times. It was hard not to say, oh my goodness.
Yeah. So we've seen The Wall, which is another kind of wacky movie interpretation of a rock opera. I'm a fan of The Wall. I'm a fan of Tommy. I think Tommy as a story might be a stronger rock opera, but The Wall maybe has better songs. It's hard to say. But going into this, I've listened to Tommy many times. I've read up about it. I've read the intended story for it to try and get the meaning, more meaning out of the songs than what the lyrics give. You have listened to it maybe once or twice from me playing it, but it was more so like on in the background while we were doing other stuff. It wasn't like really like a sit down listen. So I think to start, I'll throw it over to you for like overarching thoughts and opinions, and then you can throw it back over to me because I'll have a lot to say when it comes to the nitty gritty. Okay.
Yeah. So to start off, I thought that Tommy was going to be born blind and deaf for whatever reason.
You thought he was going to be born deaf? Okay. That's a pretty short life.
I have trouble saying that word. Hearing impaired. I thought he was going to be born like that, you know, because of trauma of the mother losing her husband or whatever.
Okay.
But then it ended up being like a later on trauma, which I guess makes sense. That happens to some people. So that was interesting to see like all the different facets of like what I quite didn't know about the story. Like I knew sort of the bullet points, like, you know, Tommy is like a disabled person. He's really good at pinball. You know, the people around him don't treat him the best. The visuals of this film were really good.
Really?
Well,
like across the board?
Across the board. Okay. When I talk about visuals, I'm talking about from a production design standpoint.
Right. I understand. But I think there were times where I was like, wow, these are really cool visuals. And other times where I was like, this is the stupidest thing that I have seen probably the past month.
What, the Marilyn Monroe church?
Okay. That, I mean, visually, that was just weird, but I was talking about Tommy running on a green screen.
Okay, that was really funny.
It wasn't clear if he was like on a treadmill or if he was just running in place, and that went on for like a full minute.
It was very funny, though.
Yeah.
It seemed like they were leaning into it.
I mean, I love Roger Daltrey's goofy grin as Tommy.
Yeah, it's so funny.
Yeah.
Hashtag Team Tommy.
But Dean, right?
Sure.
I'm just kidding. I know the Gilmore guys.
So I think the green screen thing was like sort of a dream sequence because he was drowning and he woke up from drowning and like his mom was by his side and stuff. So I just kind of was like, oh yeah, whatever. Like that's just a silly dream sequence to me.
Right. Oh, okay. I think I pulled us too deep too fast. So let's back up a bit. Overall, I mean, we're not going to get to a rating like right off the bat, but like, did you like it?
I did like it.
Okay.
Especially compared to the other movie, which we will talk about.
Right. Okay.
So overall, fun, enjoyment. I thought that Roger Daltrey was very funny as Tommy, and I loved the celebrity cameos. And I thought the production design with the bright jewel tones was really eye-catching. Yeah,
I liked it overall. Like, I didn't I was going into it kind of neutral because having really enjoyed the album, I knew that it wasn't going to be the same. And I said that to you up front. I was like, the biggest thing that I'm going to have to get over is the fact that I know the instrumentation and the singing is going to be different than on the album. I know it's going to be different people singing. They're not going to use the same instruments and recordings that they did on the album. So I'm going to have to get past that in advance because otherwise I'm going to hate it. And then like not even 30 seconds into the movie, I'm like, man, they're really going hard on the synth and organs. This wasn't on the album.
Yeah, I said that every few minutes.
Yeah, constantly through the runtime, I was either like, oh, this wasn't on the album, or this was on the album, but it was different, or like, oh, this is a pretty accurate representation of what was on the album. So I went in with positive expectations because I love the album, but negative expectations because I knew it would be different. So that kind of balanced out and made it neutral. So I came away from it enjoying it. I would probably watch it again, but there were definitely parts that I hated, but there were parts that I really, really liked.
I think I would watch it again in a theater with like a live orchestra.
Right.
Or showing it to like a friend that was like a big Who fan that hasn't seen it before or something. Like make it an event.
Yeah, because seeing The Wall, again, I like the album of The Wall, but seeing the movie version, I was like, okay, one and done. That's fine.
Yeah, it was a little... The Wall is a bit more dark in tone and theme. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit harder to just be like, yeah, let's throw on The Wall. Whereas Tommy, you know, it's brightly colored. It's a little more tongue-in-cheek, even though it's kind of tough subject matter at times.
It knew what it was doing. There was a lot of melodrama, but it was great melodrama.
It was melodrama played lightly. Like the whole thing with like the Cousin Kevin and Uncle Ernie, and like they tried to stay on the light side of it most of the time. Right.
But speaking of The Wall, I think that was one thing that helped me enjoy Tommy, is that I had that experience with The Wall where I liked the album and I knew that the instrumentation and music would be different in the film, but in the film version of The Wall, I'd say it was worse than the album across the board. Whereas with the film version of Tommy, some songs were worse than the album. Certainly some of the extra stuff that they added in, I wasn't a fan of. That was just kind of an excuse to have Anne Margaret flip around on the floor and give her more screen time. Other songs, like I think Eyesight to the Blind was the one with Eric Clapton. That one was, it was so different from what was on the album. They just took it in a different direction that I can't call it better or worse, but I liked it. And then there were tracks that were just absolutely fantastic in what they chose to do with them. I'm thinking of one in particular, but we'll get to that. But that was part of what helped me enjoy the film version of Tommy, was that they did different things with it.
Mm-hmm. From my perspective, it was helpful to have you say, oh, well, that wasn't on the album, because I've heard the album a few times and I've heard some of the songs lots of times, but I'm not as much of an audiophile as you. So there was no way I'd be like, oh, well, they switched that line around and stuff. Like I wouldn't know that as well as you. So that was helpful to like be like, oh, this is different.
Right. Well, it's because I listened to Tommy so many times. Like there was some obvious stuff that stuck out, like when songs on the album were originally shorter and they added more verses. It's like, okay, well, clearly this wasn't a thing. But then like individual words would be switched around. Like they did Do You Think It's All Right like 3 times, and that only happens once on the album, and it's about Uncle Ernie. But they did it once about Cousin Kevin, once about Uncle Ernie, and then the third time I think they were just like, we don't care about Tommy, we're just leaving him alone.
She said, do you think it's all right that he stares at himself in the mirror?
Right.
Because he can't see.
Yeah. Well, okay, speaking of that, jumping back to the story, like I said, I've researched the album and looked into the meaning behind the lyrics a bit more. After watching the movie, was there anything that you, story-wise, still didn't get, or anything that you were confused about that I can maybe fill in the blanks, or was it pretty straightforward?
It was mostly straightforward. I am curious if they talk about like him looking in the mirror while him being blind, or if that was just a visual representation.
Yeah, the mirror is a big thing in the album because it's kind of like the only thing that seems to give Tommy stimulation, is that he can't seem to see anything in the world. He doesn't react to anything. But when he looks at himself in the mirror, he seems to see. And so I know in the movie it seemed like when he regained his senses, it was because he like almost drowned. But in the in the movie, it was kind of a blink and you miss it moment. But in the album, it was more like he was able to regain his senses because he was looking at himself in the mirror, and they smashed the mirror while he was looking at it. So it kind of like snapped him out of it. So the mirror was a big theme in the album, for sure.
Well, yeah, she does do that. Like, Anne Margaret smashes the window and he goes through it.
I know, but it's like the smash and then the drowning happens at the same time, so it's not really clear what the cause and effect is.
That's true. That's interesting. Well, I mean, it is a psychosomatic thing.
Yeah.
I think it's so weird that, like, the dad came back and then, like, the husband, or, like... What's his name?
The stepdad.
Frank? Yeah, the stepdad. Yeah. I think it's so weird he like killed him and she just like stayed with him.
Right. Okay, actually that is probably one of the biggest differences between the album and the movie. Is in the movie the dad goes off to war and then she takes a new husband. The dad comes back and the new husband kills Tommy's dad. In the album it was the opposite. The dad goes off to war, and then the mom takes a new husband. The dad comes back, and then the dad kills the step-husband. Or
because
step-husband.
He's jealous.
What does a step-husband be? The dad kills the stepdad. The new husband.
Yeah.
Which it seems like a pretty weird choice. Like, why possibly switch that around? But I think I kind of understand what they were getting at, is because Tommy's dad, or at least father figure in the album, doesn't really have much of a presence. But in the film, it was more clear that he was like creepy, crappy to Tommy and like doing bad stuff. And I think they maybe thought it would make more sense if it was his stepdad, because then it would be like, oh, well, clearly he doesn't care about Tommy because Tommy's not his son. Yeah. Whereas that wouldn't have made as much sense if it was his actual dad. But that's one of the biggest differences, is the old switcheroo on that.
Yeah, I think like evil step-parent is kind of a thematic thing in literature, media, so that makes sense.
Right. And that the stepdad looked so familiar, and I couldn't place him.
Creepy.
I couldn't place him the whole time. For a second, I thought he was like, I went back and forth thinking whether or not he was Commandant Spangler from Malcolm in the Middle, the guy who runs the military academy.
That'd be so funny.
I'm pretty sure it's not, though. I'm gonna look it up right now.
Yeah, you should do it.
Feel free to vamp while I do my little typing here.
During Pinball Wizard, all I could think about was that scene in Veronica Mars where she does like the pinball wizard thing.
What scene?
Do you remember that? Okay.
Are you thinking about when she sings One Way or Another?
No.
I'm gonna find you.
No, that
I'm gonna get you. Wait, I'm not imagining that, right?
No,
that did happen.
So that was a karaoke scene where she was looking for a clue. She was trying to investigate someone that went to a karaoke bar, and they like told her she had to go up. No, there was a scene where she's talking to the character Dick, I think, and she starts like quoting Pinball Wizard and then like does like a slam dunk move.
I think you're making this up.
No, I'm not. We should probably just rewatch all of Veronica Mars and find out.
Okay, we're going to pause the podcast and we'll come back right after we watch all 3 seasons of Veronica Mars and the movie.
But not season 4.
I don't think they made a season 4.
No, that's correct.
Okay, be right back. And we're back.
Hashtag Team Logan for this, not for the other thing.
I'm looking up the guy who I thought was Commandant Spangler, who isn't actually. I don't think I've seen him in anything else.
Darn.
So maybe he just has one of those faces.
Well, we're talking about people that we thought played the roles. My headcanon was that young Tommy was played by Andy Richter.
I mean, I liked that kid. I thought that they did a good job of picking a kid who looked like he couldn't react to all the stimuli around him. That kid did a good job.
Yeah. I mean, he looks vaguely like Roger Daltrey as well, so that helped.
But okay, so speaking of Pinball Wizard, unequivocally the best scene in the movie.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I don't think there's any arguing. But like for so many reasons too. Like we already love Elton John, so that was one thing. So there's that. Pinball Wizard is already one of the best songs on the album.
Super catchy.
Yeah, they went all out with the production design on it. Plus, it's the scene in the movie where you most get to see the actual band, like the Who.
That's true.
And at first it seems like, oh, it's just like a fun little cameo. You know, you see Pete Townshend rocking away and all that, and it's like, okay, sure. But then they actually go full on Who and start like jumping around and smashing their instruments, and it's like,
it was fun.
How could this not be the best scene?
Yeah, and Elton John just like falls over and he like takes his hat off, and then like Tommy's wearing his hat.
Yeah, well, it's because of the line. I just handed my pinball crown to him. I know it's not a real crown. Oh, right. And then
no, it has a pinball on the top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
but it's more like a pinball beanie.
Sure.
A pinball tube.
It was stylish.
Or toboggan, if you will.
Oh, no.
But we won't.
No.
And then, as I said earlier, that's probably the song in the movie. I'm not going to say that it's better than the Who album version of Pinball Wizard, but it's definitely equally fantastic in its own right. And it's one of the songs where they added extra lyrics to it, and I didn't think it was bad. Other songs was kind of like, okay, This song was 10 seconds on the album. It could have been 10 seconds in the movie, but I get it. They got to pad out the runtime. I don't know how long the album was. I think it was a double album, so probably more than 45 minutes, but I don't think it was 2 hours. So they obviously had to pad it a lot. But
there was like extra songs and stuff.
I mean, some of the padding was way, way too much. Like I said, just an excuse to get more screen time for Anne Margaret.
Oh yeah, like Bye Bye Birdie.
Yeah, and just like her rolling around on the ground in the baked beans and stuff was like, clearly this was just something for the people in the room, for the cameramen to enjoy, and had absolutely no impact on the plot, and was just to pad the runtime.
It was a little crazy. It was like, you got the soap suds, and it was like, okay, I see what we're doing here. And then and then they like bring out the baked beans and the chocolate sauce, and I was like, okay, you lost me. This has gone from gratuitous to I don't even know what this is. Yeah.
And then again, to top it all off, the song that she was singing wasn't even in the album. You definitely heard that comment from me multiple times. Oh, this wasn't in the album. No, this is different on the album.
She just like grabs white flowers and like rubs on her face. Like, why?
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if somebody tries to find the deeper meaning in that, and it's like, oh no, it represents the purity of Tommy that she's blah, 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 blah.
Well, okay, to be fair, there is some meaning in that track. Is like, she's trying to fill her life with things. Like, you got like the soap commercial, you got the beans commercial, you got like the chocolate commercial, she's got like all the jewelry and stuff. Like, none of it's making her happy, and she wants to look at Tommy, she wants to be part of Tommy's life, but she doesn't. It's like too painful for her to be part of Tommy's life, so she's trying to like fill her life with things, and it's not working anymore.
Right. I wasn't saying that the song didn't have meaning. I was just saying that like like that meaning was self-explanatory, I felt, but
definitely, or
Hannah explanatory, as we just experienced. But everything after the lyrics stopped was just like completely stupid.
Yeah, it went from this is just kind of like bizarre to like this is crazy.
Yeah. I was really looking forward to the Acid Queen sequence because I've heard really good things about it, and I was pretty underwhelmed.
I thought it was funny.
It was funny, and Tina Turner is freaking creepy.
That was so funny. Like, they did a close-up of her face, like, quivering. I'm like, this is a scary movie.
It was very scary. But that song, I think, exemplified one of my main problems with some of the music in the film. And thankfully, it wasn't in every song. And it kind of got better as it went along. But the problem that I'm thinking of is kind of talk singing, you know?
Where she tends to do that.
I mean, a little bit in that song, but a lot in the earlier songs is like, instead of singing it the way that it was sung on the album, like, if your child ain't all he should be now, you know, instead it's kind of talk saying like, if your child ain't all he should be now, like very very monotone, one note, which is something that happens in these kinds of
rock operas, like
film adaptations of albums. Is they don't want to go all out with the actual singing part. They want to make it feel half like dialogue and half singing. But to me, that just ruins the musical integrity of the song.
That's
like
true.
if you're gonna adapt music, then adapt the freaking music. Don't just try to like dialogify it.
I think sometimes they do like stunt casting, or they cast based on looks but not voice. Right. Sometimes with things like this, so then you'll have like the people just kind of like half singing because they're not good at it.
Right. I mean, that we were bordering on that territory with Jack Nicholson singing
it was all right.
Go to the Mirror, I think it was.
I'm not even convinced that it was his real voice. I don't know. It might have been like a Singing in the Rain.
I mean, he tried. It
was
but
fine.
If you listen to that song on the album, there's a lot more going on with it than that it seemed like Jack Nicholson could pull off. So I think you're right. I think they casted more for face and looks and acting than for the actual singing, which is a shame because the music is really, really good.
Okay, so while we're on the topic of the Doctor, maybe you could fill me in a little bit more about that section.
Yeah.
Because, Tommy has been disabled, or differently abled, whatever, for most of his life. And now they're going to a doctor after he's like famous and good at pinball, and like it just seems weird. And they're like, yeah, we can't really do anything. Like he can hear you, or like, but he can't respond or something. And then, Anne Margaret's kind of like seducing him, and they hand him a check. Like, what did that mean? I didn't really grasp that.
Okay, well, the seducing wasn't in the album at all.
Okay.
That part wasn't there. My way of interpreting it was just that I imagined that they had visited many doctors over the years, and they just like, there wouldn't have been any point to sing about like, well, we went to this doctor and he didn't know, and we went to another doctor and he didn't know. Like, it's just like what would be the point?
Sounds
right?
like a Flight of the Conchords song.
So I interpret it as like they only sang about the one doctor who like maybe gave a little bit of insight into his situation, instead of being like, just pump him full of drugs and see what happens or something, like. The one doctor, I guess, who realized that it was psychosomatic. That was my interpretation. But yeah, the actual the seducing and whatever was going on there wasn't in the album at all. It was
just to fill it out. But he like hands the doctor a check, just being like, I don't know, we're throwing all this money at this problem kind of thing, or
I guess. I don't know. I kind of stopped paying attention to what was going on with the father figure because I was like, well, I don't like him. He's a poop nose.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's other aspects of the film that I'm like,
I mean, a big moment for me was the fact that there was a fully operational pinball game in a junkyard somehow plugged in and able to be played.
That's true. But it was totally fine that the Tommy and the Mirror, like, let him into the junk house.
Oh, yeah, that part made perfect sense.
And let him to the pinball.
Yeah. I love the part where it was, like, the nonsensical biker gang, like, fighting, and then all of a sudden one looks up in the air, and you turn to me and you kind of joked, like, like, Tommy's flying up there. And then it cut, and he's, like, on a freaking hang glider flying through the sky, and he's like, I'm coming!
I did not expect that. It just seems like the overture, like the theme was like, oh yeah, Tommy's like a superhero coming to save them because they were like in trouble.
Yeah. Speaking of the overture, I know we're jumping around a lot, but the overture is one of my favorite parts of the album. Because, as Daryl in The Office says, if we don't listen to the overture, we won't recognize the musical theme. They do a really good job of that, of weaving together a wordless medley of music to come. And that kind of set me off on the wrong foot right at the beginning of the movie because I felt they freaking butchered the overture. Mm-hmm. Like, it was unrecognizable. And it was just filled with synth and organ. And I was like, what is even going on right now? Have they started the album yet? And then they jumped right into, like, Captain Walker, It's a Boy. And I was like, was that the overture? Did we just do it? That was like nothing. Mm-hmm. That kind of bummed me out. That's true.
I mean, my interpretation of this is, we're doing a film. we're gonna do something different than we did on the album. We're gonna have some fun and experiment, you know.
Nah.
Nah.
Wasn't fun for me.
Yeah. The album is better.
Well, I mean, it's true. You know. If you haven't listened to the album, Tommy, I definitely recommend it. It goes by pretty fast. Actually, you know what? The first time I listened to it, I hated it.
Really? Why?
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't get it. I'm the kind of person who needs to listen to songs more than once, both to gain meaning and to gain appreciation. Like, thinking back, and I know we've had this conversation before, maybe like a year or two ago, but thinking back, pretty well any song that I love today, I didn't like the first time I heard it. You know,
well, you're a different person than you were back then.
But I mean, it's not even like I listened to it once and then I listened to it again like 5 years later, and I'm like, no, it's actually good. You know, it's like the first time I heard "Stairway to Heaven," which is funny because there's a Led Zeppelin shirt like, 30 centimeters away. The first time I heard "Stairway to Heaven," I hated it.
How could you hate that? That's
I don't know.
Such a classic song.
My mom showed it to me, and she played like the first 30 seconds or whatever, and I'm like, ugh, what is this waste of time? And my mom was like, I thought you would like it because there's like flute sounds, like ocarina, like an Ocarina of Time, like Zelda sort of thing. And I'm like, stupid.
Ocarina.
And then only listening to it later did I gain appreciation for it. So when I listened to Tommy the first time, pretty much the only song that I liked was Pinball Wizard, and the rest I was like, well, this is a waste of time. But only upon more listens to it did I gain more of an appreciation and reading about the story, to the point that I love most every song on the album except for the ones that are like only a couple seconds, or Fiddle About is not exactly a pleasure to listen
creepy.
To. But yeah,
did not enjoy that.
So maybe the same thing will happen with the Tommy movie. If I listen to the soundtrack more and more, I'll enjoy it. But yeah.
Okay, we have to talk about the Acid Queen scene in more depth, because there was a lot of crazy visuals in that, and I need to make some kind of sense of it.
Right. Well, we started off with Robotina.
Yeah, I was not expecting that.
And then Robotina opened up, Tommy climbed in, and then like 30 or 40 syringes just took out like 3 pints of his blood and then pumped it back in, and it was a good time. What else is there to analyze? Well,
then he like turned into his dad, and then he was a skeleton with snakes crawling inside of him.
I think I blacked out by that point.
And Margaret was just like convulsing on the floor. And then
Anne Margaret was going for it this entire movie.
I mean, she went for it like pretty hard in Bye Bye Birdie. That's the reason why I like her. Like, she's so committed to what she's doing.
There was 100% commitment in this movie. Like, she was bouncing off the walls, just like looking crazy. It was intense and great.
Mm-hmm. She's definitely a standout in this film.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does it mean? So is it Acid Queen as in like literal acid, or is it just, she's like acidic, like she's like bitter, evil, spiteful person kind of thing?
Interesting. I mean, certainly when I listen to the album version, I just thought of it as like, basically a prostitute who drops acid with Tommy, and that's pretty much it. But the movie went completely off the wall with it and nuts.
I thought it was interesting because I don't think acid is usually done with syringes, right? Like, no. I wouldn't know.
No.
So that seemed like a whole other level of something else. And it was so weird, like her, like Tina Turner holding the syringe and then like tapping it and like just being like over Tommy, just like, it was so creepy. I
mean, I hope she had some fun on set.
It seemed like fun.
Yeah. I think, but definitely my favorite of the celebrities who were involved was Elton John, because that version of the song is just fantastic, and he seemed like he was having a good time. I wish I had a pinball machine that had keyboard keys on it.
Absolutely. Well, you listened to his autobiography. Did he talk about like his experience on set at all, or?
A little bit, I think. The main thing that I remember was that some other singer was offered the role of Pinball Wizard and asked Elton John for advice. And Elton John was like, "Oh no, that's stupid. That's a terrible idea. Don't touch that thing with a 10-foot pole. You'll regret it. Just like back away. Whatever you do, don't do it." And then they were like, "Hey, Elton John, do you want to do it?" And he was like, "Yeah."
I think it's the perfect choice for it, really, because like the glitz and the glamour and the goofiness just work so well with him.
Yeah.
And I think his costume would be a perfect baby costume.
A baby costume?
Yeah, with like the glitzy sunglasses and the little beanie and like the long legs. It would be so funny.
Yeah. Thinking about the way that they chose to handle some of the songs as, you know, doing it just like it was done in the album, like Cousin Kevin, versus doing them in a completely different way, completely different style. I'd be interested to see an edit of all the visuals from the movie paired with the music straight from the album. In fact, you know, if I had free time on like a lazy Saturday or something, maybe I'd throw that together, because I do really love the music on the album, and I don't know if the music in the film compares in quite the same way because of some of that talk singing that I talked about.
I would be surprised if there wasn't already sort of a fan edit version of that on YouTube, because there's a fan edit version of the Hobbit films made into one film.
Rightfully so. It was one book.
So I wouldn't be surprised if there was a fan edit.
Right. Because, I mean, the visual aspect of the movie was definitely the best part.
Like, my favorite part was the jewel tones of each song. So, like, Cousin Kevin was yellow. Tina Turner's Acid Queen was red. Uncle Ernie was green and blue. There was usually one color sparking the scene where it was like, this is all this one color. Except for, like, Pinball Wizard was more of a rainbow kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, I like the choices that they made with it. Like, Cousin Kevin was, like, all yellow. And I just thought that was cool that they were able to explore stuff like that and just do it in, like, a really interesting, fun way.
Yeah, the production design definitely hit the mark, I would say. So not all the filmmaking was particularly great. Like, I remember during the Christmas segment, which again is one of my favorite songs, and otherwise a well-directed scene that's pretty faithful to the album. There's just one part where they do a slow zoom out of the camera, and they just leave it there for, like, I don't know, 30, 40 seconds. Camera doesn't move, camera doesn't cut. They're still singing the song. Just that one shot. I'm like, filmmaking here is leaving a little bit to be desired.
It is a little blah. I mean, there is choreography. They're doing like a conga line.
Right.
It's like they could have done a close-up.
Choreography, sure, but, you know, no cuts or anything.
Yeah, that was a little something to be desired.
Yeah.
And, you know, the fast zooms in to Tommy's face. That was pretty crazy. It was kind of funny, though. Just like zoom in, zoom in, zoom in.
I did like some of the crazier stuff that they went for during the scenes where it was showing kind of what's going through Tommy's mind, like what he's seeing, but what he's not seeing. I like that stuff.
Well, it's sort of to tie in the different color palettes. Like, after a song, he would see a different facet of himself in the mirror. Right. So, like, yellow, red, green, I think. Yeah. What did you interpret that to mean?
I honestly didn't give it a second thought. So it's only dawning on me now that you're saying that there was more meaning behind it. So that's interesting. But.
Well, it's maybe like each of these experiences affected him and how he sees himself in the mirror, maybe.
Right. Like I mentioned when we watched Enemy, I tend to just take things at face value when I watch a movie. So I'm like, oh, he's yellow in the mirror. That's kooky.
Well, it's like it's after, you know, he gets bullied by Cousin Kevin. Right. So it's like now he has like, or maybe it's like to mark like all the negative things in his life. Like with the Acid Queen, it's like he has all these negative aspects in his life kind of piling on to him being who he is and, you know, suffering from all this trauma.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, so I guess we both liked it. I think we've
definitely
established that. What would you rate it out of 5, out of 10, however you want to rate it?
I mean, it was kooky, but that kind of made it more fun for me. It did drag on in some parts. Like, some songs just went on too long. It was a little blah at some parts.
Way too long, yeah.
But still, overall, fun. I enjoyed it. I thought most of the actors were good. Like the production design. I might give it a 7.5 out of 10.
A 7.5? What are you rating out of 20?
7.5, so that's... Wait.
A 7.5 would be 3.25. No, 3.5.
Okay.
3 and 3/4.
So, sorry, 7 out of...
Sorry, 3 3/4 out of 5 is what I meant.
What I meant to say was 7 out of 10, 3.5 out of 5.
Okay, yeah. I wouldn't go lower than a 7 out of 10. I don't know if I want to go as high as an 8 out of 10.
To me, it's not quite there. Like, I think it's 7 for me is like average, like a B. And then 8 out of 10 is like an A.
Well, you know what, too, is like it really didn't have to be 2 hours. They should have trimmed the fat. Because I'm looking at it now. So the studio album of Tommy is 75 minutes. So it's over an hour. It's a double album. I think a normal LP is about 45 minutes. So it's, you know, it's up there. It didn't need to be padded out by another like 45 minutes. You know, they could have just added an extra like 5-10 minutes and it would have been fine.
They were probably just trying to give more screen time to Anne Margaret. To be like, oh, it's starring Anne Margaret.
Yeah.
To get people in the seats.
It seemed like hers were most of the added stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think maybe if they trimmed the fat, it would be an 8. Maybe upon a rewatch, it'll be an 8. But as it stands, I'll give it a 7 out of 10, 3.5 out of 5.
Like I said, if we saw it in a live theater with like an orchestra, that would probably be an 8 out of 10 for me, but just at home, like a 7.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in addition to Tommy, we did another sort of rock-oriented watch. I got, as a birthday gift from my mom, the Blu-ray of The Beatles, 8 Days a Week, The Touring Years, which is a documentary directed by Ron Howard, ? Not,
it is,
I'm not saying it's a question mark, like, is it directed by Ron Howard? I'm saying, like, directed by Ron Howard, is that a selling point, really? Does it have the Ron Howard touch?
I don't know, because he's made other films like Cocoon and stuff.
The list goes on.
The list goes on. I'm sure he's directed Arrested Development or whatever.
Right.
But
so it was a documentary using some nice, never before seen footage from the Beatles' touring years, and I thought it was good.
It was fine.
It was very fine. But the main thing I came away thinking, like, it was very enjoyable as a Beatles fan. I'm a huge Beatles fan. But the issue with it is that it felt like maybe one of many.
Yeah. It didn't feel special, like Get Back.
Yeah. Well, of course, I'm going to talk about Get Back, but we'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely enjoyable. You know, I love the Beatles. I love hearing the Beatles studio albums. I love hearing Beatles outtakes and seeing them being kooky and joking around and stuff. I think where the documentary was strongest was probably when they were talking about their like really early stuff in the Cavern Club and
because that we haven't seen as much footage of or know as much about as some of the later points in their career.
Yeah. So I guess I would say as something that focuses on their touring years, it did a great job, because most other Beatles documentaries and Beatles media, I think, like, focus on their American debut and then kind of gloss over the touring stuff a bit and then jump right to, Sgt. Pepper and their more visceral album experiences. Mm-hmm. But this one kind of stopped right at Sgt. Pepper, and we got to dive a little bit deeper into more of the specifics of the touring, which was very interesting.
I mean, yeah, that's not what the film was about. It wasn't about like their studio years, right? So it made sense that they glossed over it, which is fine.
Yeah. But it was cool for me as a Beatles fan just to see like a large amount of relatively high quality footage of them doing their Beatle-y thing.
The Beatle-y thing, yeah.
Yeah. What was your perspective as more of like a late to mid Beatles fan?
I mean, especially after Get Back, like, I'm a decent level Beatles fan. Like, I've listened to a lot of Beatles. Of course, I'm not your level, but I love the Beatles.
I mean, when you say my level, I would consider my level, like, the light end of a hardcore fan. You know, like, I've listened to all their music.
You've seen Paul McCartney couple times.
Yeah. I've listened to all their studio albums, their Christmas album, most of the albums, if not all of the albums, multiple times. I wouldn't be able to like pick out what a song is from hearing the first 2 seconds of it. Yes, I know some fans would, maybe some of the more popular ones, of course, but you know, I do enjoy a healthy dose of Beatle.
That being said, when we were watching Get Back, you're like, oh, this wasn't the version on the album.
Well, again, same with Tommy. It's like, it's just because of the sheer amount of times that I've listened to the music.
Yeah, so that speaks to the level of fan you are, I think.
Yeah. And okay, so going into Get Back for a second, this documentary, 8 Days a Week, came out in 2016. At the time, if I had seen it in 2016, I would have been like, "Oh man, this is like the best Beatles documentary I've ever seen."
Thus far, yeah.
Thus far. Now it is totally overshadowed by Get Back. And the thing about Get Back is that it's just such a moment in time that the thing that makes it so effective is like, obviously they did a great job editing it, but just the fact that the story is being told by the story unfolding in front of you. You know, they don't have to cut to Paul McCartney in the present day being like, oh, it's really a crazy time. And
we wore wigs.
They're wearing wigs. Which is hilarious in its own right, and I love that. Yeah. But that was what made Get Back feel so special and made it not feel like one of many, as I said before, is that it was literally just the footage of the time, and you felt like you were there. It felt like a time warp back to 1969, and you're sitting in the room with them. That's what made that feel so special and so unique. And maybe we'll do a whole podcast talking about Get Back at some point, because there's so much to say. But 8 Days a Week obviously went in a different direction, and I still really enjoyed it, you know? Lots of really funny parts, like when they finished the take and Paul was like, oh, that was great. Mock that one, fab. Yeah, loved that.
That is very funny.
Yeah.
But the Beatles were such cheeky lads. And that was my favorite part, was seeing them goof around, like all crawl into bed wearing like turtlenecks, like cuddling with John Lennon. Like that was great, just seeing like the Beatles being the Beatles. What I loved about Get Back that I found 8 Days a Week to be a little just like, fine, is Get Back had a lot of raw, candid moments of the Beatles being the Beatles.
Right.
Whereas 8 Days a Week was like a big overview of like, these are the Beatles. And like mostly them on stage, because this is like touring years and stuff.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to see from that was, what are the special stories? What were the little inside jokes? You know, because they interviewed Paul McCartney and Ringo. I wanted to hear more about like the stuff that fans wouldn't know already.
Yeah.
You know, less about, oh yeah, we made our American debut and we didn't think that we would hit a stride with them, but then we did. And, you know, there's lots of screaming fans, and like we've seen all that footage before. You know, I would have liked to see more like a peek behind the curtain, if you will, which is what Get Back gave us. Was it just them hanging in the studio and like not really caring, because they're like, oh, we're just recording the whole time. So they felt like they could let loose and maybe like be a little less on than they normally are if they were doing like a person-to-person interview.
Well, different subjects, right? I mean, that comes with the territory. You're actively not going to get the Beatles relaxing and acting like they're not on if the documentary is centered around their touring, right? Because that's like the whole point of touring, is that, you know, they were on.
Right. No, that's fine. I just wish we heard more like stories like, oh yeah, and after the show that we played with the Rolling Stones, we went back to their house and we had a big party and we met Elvis and like stuff like that. Like I wanted to hear more like fun stories, which I know are out there.
Yeah.
Instead of just like more of an overview is like, we did this tour and we did this tour and we were burnt out because there was like so many fans kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, you know, what we may need to do is get our hands on as many Beatles documentaries as we can find. and
Beatles biopics.
And, well, I don't know about that, but...
What? No, that's like a whole other thing. Like the Quarrymen and like, what is it, Nowhere Boy and like all of those.
I just want to see the real. I want the real feel, you know? Yeah, I think we should watch more Beatles documentaries and rank them and see if there's anything that can surpass Get Back. I don't know.
I don't think so.
I mean, I was hype about Get Back from day one. 100%. You know? From when I heard that they announced that they were doing it, because before that, I tried to show you the actual Let It Be film, the one that came out in 1970, and it's like almost impossible to find.
Now it's going to be even more impossible to find because they're probably trying to bury it. So yeah, like, watch Get Back.
I went out shopping for it, like looking for the DVD and whatever, and I couldn't find it. You know, I tried to find it online and I couldn't. The only way that I could find it was like as a download from a sketchy site in like super, super low quality. I'm like, well, it's not worth watching this way. So when they announced Get Back, I was like, I'll just buy my ticket now. Like I'm in. Of course, at that point, I thought it was going to be like a 2-hour movie released in a theater. And I got even more than I bargained for because it was like 8 hours of fetal goodness.
Oh, yeah. That was so worth it.
And then when they dropped the first trailer, I was like, well, Peter Jackson was like, oh, it's not a trailer. It's just like a little taste. And I'm like, well, if that's not a trailer, that's the best not a trailer I have ever seen in my life.
To be honest, I was a little worried that they were showing like the best footage in that trailer.
But not even.
Not even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was still so much good stuff to choose from.
I really like that it was a relaxed kind of experience of like being a fly on the wall with the Beatles, which I don't think some other people would like because it's less structured.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm assuming Let It Be, they tried to make it a lot more cinematic and stuff. And Ringo said that they heightened the drama too much and made it seem like it wasn't what it was. Right. Kind of thing.
Well, you know, maybe we'll do a full-on episode on Get Back and we'll cross over maybe with Carl and Gabe Go to the Movies, because I know Carl had some opinions on the Beatles Get Back as well. He's a Beatles fan. I'd love to talk about that more in depth with him.
Definitely.
But back to 8 Days a Week. I mean, again, there was completely nothing wrong with the documentary at all. Fine. There was no stupid moments, no bad moments. It was completely entertaining. I would throw it on again right now and watch it like any day. It's just the fact that Get Back is out now completely overshadows it. And not only that, but it actually ended, 8 Days a Week ended almost teasing Get Back, because they're like, oh, you know, like 1965, 66, they stopped touring and then they didn't play a live show again until their rooftop concert in 1969. And then they play footage from it. And it's like, it's almost like, should we just throw on Get Back right now?
I know, because it showed like the whole rooftop performance in Get Back. It was just like uncomparable. It was like, oh yeah, here's a scene from them playing their like legendary rooftop, never done before performance, and like Get Back shows the whole thing.
I mean, this is how much Get Back overshadows 8 Days a Week, is that I keep trying to bring the conversation back to 8 Days a Week. I'm like, this is the movie that we watched, we should stay on topic, and I keep drifting back to Get Back.
It's like 8 Days a Week is frozen pizza, and Get Back is fire roasted pizza from the restaurant.
But I don't think we're trying to say there's anything wrong with frozen pizza.
I love frozen pizza.
I would go get a frozen pizza right now.
Absolutely. But if it was the choice between like wood burning like Italian restaurant pizza, it's like I gotta pick that.
By the way, so audience, next time you get a frozen pizza, just go ahead and make yourself your own little dipping sauce. You want to grab maybe like half a cup of mayonnaise, and then squirt maybe, you know, like a quarter of a lemon in there. Or if you don't have a lemon, you can use vinegar. Do a little twist of pepper, some salt, and then crush up maybe 2 or 3 cloves of garlic if you like it really garlicky. Throw those in there. Stir it around. Maybe a couple dashes of cayenne pepper if you like some spice. And then kick. My secret ingredient.
Love.
Well, that's the obvious ingredient, not so secret. Definitely put some love in. My secret ingredient, I'm going to whisper because it's secret. My secret ingredient is about a teaspoon of sesame oil. Throw a teaspoon of sesame oil in there. You know what? Make it a tablespoon. Tablespoon of sesame oil in there. Stir that all up. Ugh.
I think we need to eat some pizza right now.
You'll never want to buy store-bought or, you know, delivery garlic dip again. And you know what? It's not just good on pizza. You take that garlic, spicy, mayo, sesame dip, you put that on a burger bun, throw that on a burger,
so
you will never look back, my friend.
Baby, you got a stew going.
Yeah. So Beatles.
Yeah, so Beatles. Okay, so the one part that I did find quite interesting was Sigourney Weaver making like a random cameo, being like, "Oh yeah, I was there. I love the Beatles. It was awesome. I was at the Hollywood Bowl," and it like showed a shot of her. It cut to
actual footage of Sigourney Weaver in the audience.
That was one of the best parts.
That legitimately blew my mind. I was like nearly speechless.
I was kind of hoping the same thing with Whoopi because she said that she got to see them at Shea Stadium. Yeah. And it was like, but she probably...
That was such a massive audience.
And she said she was poor and she came from, you know, like a low income family. So she probably was in one of the higher seats. Yeah. There might not have been a shot of her in the audience.
Right. Well, the Sigourney Weaver moment, I was looking at that as like from an editor's perspective, is that like how many hours of footage would that editor have to have combed through in order to find probably the one shot that contained Sigourney Weaver? Because I'm sure Sigourney Weaver wasn't like, oh, they definitely caught me on camera. Like, she wouldn't know. She was probably just like, this is the concert I was at, and, you know, I was there. If they got me, they got me. And then they would find the footage and probably have to spend like hours looking for one shot, because it's not like,
was really cool though.
even if the you know, because the photographer or the videographer rather happened to land on Sigourney Weaver, it's not like he sat there filming her for like half an hour. He probably got like a 5-second shot and then moved on.
I mean, that guy had no idea that she was going to be such a big like sci-fi star. Well, there's no way.
For sure, yeah. And then another one of my favorite crowd moments, like this one moment probably made the whole documentary for me. I put it in my Letterboxd review. By the way, shout out to our Letterboxd. I'm Winesty on Letterboxd, unfortunately. Wish it was something different, but what can you do? And you are.
Always change it. Hannah Brannon.
Yeah, so go check out our Letterboxds. So I put this in my review. Is like the one moment that made the entire documentary for me was the entire sea of drunken Liverpool lads singing along to She Loves You was like the best thing I had seen all week.
It was so many. It was like thousands of just like the most straight men.
All men, yeah.
Being like, she loves you. Yeah. That was great.
It was heartwarming. I had the biggest, goofiest grin on my face watching that. It was awesome.
I love seeing some dorky girl fans being like crying and holding a sign that says like King Ringo and like stuff like that.
Yeah. That was great.
That was so fun.
So I definitely enjoyed it.
That was the best part, was like seeing like some of the more obscure footage that they don't always show.
Yeah.
But
the fan reactions and like that's a knock maybe against Get Back. You know, a different style, not better, not worse, is that since they did interviews for 8 days a week, you were able to see that stuff with Sigourney Weaver and Whoopi Goldberg, and that was a really interesting perspective. So that was kind of like a good thing and a bad thing about Get Back, was that there was no hindsight. It was all in the moment.
I mean, that's what made it such a beautiful time capsule, was we got to see them at this time in their lives. You know, Paul McCartney is like 24. Ringo's like 29, and just like seeing them in the moment of recording that album and coming up with those songs right on the spot. That was just like so beautiful. It's like lightning in a bottle kind of thing.
Yeah. So coming back to sort of the question that I asked to start this off, how would you compare Ron Howard's documentary directorial style versus Peter Jackson's documentary directorial style? There's obviously stark differences.
Well, I think Peter Jackson's was more dependent on crafting a story that was already there in the editing, but just polishing like what was already made kind of thing.
Letting it speak for itself.
Yeah, exactly. And just trying to piece it together so it was cohesive. Mm-hmm. Whereas Ron Howard was trying to tell a story that's already happened.
Right. That story was full of hindsight. All looking back on like, oh, what a time it was, and less about like being there just in the moment. Yeah,
my complaint about that was it was maybe like a little polished, like, oh yeah, the Beatles are great. And it's like, yeah, the Beatles are great, but
yeah, we want to see some of the bad moments too.
Yeah, so like Get Back. Get Back shows, Ringo like interrupting people and like
being like, I've fought. And
John Lennon being annoying, and George
John and Yoko being annoying.
Oh well, yeah, that goes without saying with Yoko. But where Paul and George getting into like kind of a kerfuffle, and George being like, I'm gonna leave the band now or whatever. But like, I don't know. It was a fine movie. It was just, it's so hard after we've seen something as great as Get Back to be like, yes, 8 days a week.
Yeah. It's just like,
it was fine.
8 days a week was so standard that it didn't have as much to really give it anything unique.
Yeah.
Couple moments here and there, but it felt like a pretty typical documentary. I think Ron Howard played it pretty safe. In fact, considering Ron Howard's voiceover work, I expected him to be narrating the documentary.
It might have been too distracting, honestly.
Probably, yeah. But
it was very run of the mill.
For what it is, I'm happy with what I got. I'm actually looking forward to looking at disc 2 of the Blu-ray set. Because it supposedly has like full concert footage, which I think would be really interesting, because that would, I think, show us more of those off the cuff moments. Mm-hmm. And I know there's some awkward moments of John Lennon making fun of a certain subsect of people and during some of their concerts.
Oh, really?
That, I'm sure you'll see once I put it on.
Okay,
but,
I don't really know about that.
Yeah, but you'll see. But yeah, I think it had some good stuff to offer for what I got. Very happy with it. Great gift. Thank you, Mom.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's very run of the mill. I think it lacks sort of a personality, visual flair. Like one of our favorite documentary shows, The Toys That Made Us.
Oh, yeah.
All visual flair.
That is like, it's, again, I think I mentioned this in a previous podcast episode, is that my day job is doing documentary style videos for businesses where we try to put the best of them on the screen. Toys That Made Us will put the worst of people on the screen and make it the funniest that it can be, and just like take a clip of somebody yawning in between answering questions and like make it look like they're roaring or something, or like doing something crazy. So they're able to take like a typical documentary structure and do something really kooky and crazy with it, and make it their own and do something new. Less so what 8 Days a Week did. They just, played it pretty safe.
I think it would have been fun to maybe see like some artifacts, like close-ups of like ticket stubs or, Beatles fan merch or, something like that. Yeah. That might have been fun to cut to. I don't know. Maybe interview more fans. More fans,
yeah. I mean, the interviews that they chose to do, seemed kind of strange. Like, I honestly feel like we heard more from Whoopi than we did from Ringo. Do you feel the same way?
Probably. I mean, Ringo and Paul McCartney's time is a lot more limited, probably. Or they're just they're just sick of doing interviews, kind of thing. Because they've been doing interviews for like the last 60 years.
Right. But it was good. I would watch it again. And it makes me want to watch more Beatles documentaries to get more of a full picture on everything. So I would give it at least a 7 out of 10. Maybe an 8. Kind of the same as Tommy. You know?
I think my level of Tommy was higher simply because, 8 days a week, it was a little more like general, like nothing really crazy or out there on screen. So to me, it was lower because it wasn't really like grabbing me in the same way that Tommy was.
That's fair. I'm just thinking about how much I enjoyed it. You know, like I just love seeing the Beatles on screen. The Beatles are my favorite band. I know that's a very, not special thing to say because they're like amazing, the most popular band there ever was, but
for good reason.
It's for a good reason. I love them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would watch it again.
And they created like some of the best music ever made.
Yeah. So, what do we have our eyes on next? I know we tend to mention like 10 movies at the end of an episode, and then we'll like maybe watch one of them.
Okay. I have my eyes on Hitchcock. Okay. I also have my eyes on Stanley Kubrick. Mm-hmm. I have my eyes on The Last Picture Show, which is Peter Bogdanovich. Very acclaimed director.
I'll take your word for it.
Yep. It has a very young Jeff Daniels in it.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's a coming of age movie.
On my radar, I mean, I could go for a rewatch of Spider-Man 3. Haven't seen Toy Story in a while.
Rocky 5.
Get Back. Rocky 5?
Yeah, it's your favorite one. Okay. You talk all the time about how much you love Rocky 5.
I think you may have misheard me on that. Maybe?
You said, Hannah, I love Sylvester Stallone so much. I want to be him.
Yes, that is accurate. But where does Rocky 5 come into the mix? I mean,
he's my favorite buddy. I need to have him on screen at all times.
Nonsense here. Well, maybe we can dive into Hitchcock. I mean,
I would love to.
You still haven't seen Vertigo.
No.
I despise Vertigo.
Well, I want to have an opinion on it. You know, maybe I'll hate it, but then at least I'll know.
Okay.
Kind of thing.
I don't know if we'll do a double feature, but
we could do The Birds maybe. Or I don't know, whatever one you're interested in. Or we could do another suspense film, or we could do like a Kubrick film you haven't seen. Lots of different things.
I guess we'll just have to see.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Again, I recommend listening to the album version of Tommy. I recommend listening to everything that the Beatles have ever written.
It'll only take a couple hours.
Yeah, it'll be worth it. And yeah, again, check out our Letterboxd accounts for some more detailed, actually less detailed reviews. We're a little more quippy in our Letterboxd reviews.
I think we're quippy now. We're full of quip.
I know, but it's just like we're detailed, verging on verbose in the podcast, whereas our Letterboxd reviews are more one-liners. But at least you'll get a better picture of movies that we've reviewed before starting the podcast.
For sure.
But yeah, thanks for listening. See you next time.
Yeah, I'm gonna go eat some frozen pizza.
Okay, make that dipping sauce.
Cowabunga, dudes.
Everyone out there, please make that dipping sauce. You won't regret it. Okay, bye.